So, welcome back to Everything Marketplaces, where we talk with founders and leaders from some of today's top marketplaces. So, this is episode 96, which was a really great group chat that we just had with Grant LaFontaine, who's the co founder and CEO of Whatnot. So, Whatnot is a marketplace that's redefining how people are buying and selling collectibles. They've been mentioned as the fastest growing US based marketplace and have raised over $225 million from top investors like Y Combinator, A16Z, Capital G, and more. So prior to Whatnot, Grant was working on product at Facebook, Google, and also the co-founder of kit.com that was acquired. So some really incredible experience. So this is a really great chat with Grant where we got to learn more about the founding story of Whatnot, did a deep dive into it as a marketplace for buying and selling collectibles, learn more about their incredible growth, fundraising journey, and also had a really great Q&A for those on the chat. So I really enjoyed this conversation. Now you're going to find it a great watch to the end. So Grant, welcome to the group chat. And I've been wanting to chat with you for a while now. As Whatnot comes up in the community all the time, and a big fan of the collectible space myself. So we're really excited to have you join us here today, and learn more about it. And also is the fastest growing marketplace, which is quite incredible. Before we jump into things, though, I think it might be great to start off by sharing a little bit more on your background, though, for those that don't know you.
Sure, and thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. So I'll go backwards in time to kind of talk through my experience. So started Whatnot about 2.5 years ago in December 2019. Before that, kind of have like an eclectic background. I'm kind of a bit of a jack of all trades type of person. I was at Facebook directly prior to this, working on Oculus as a product manager. Before that, was working on a startup called Kit, which was also in social commerce that sold to Patreon, kind of went to Patreon for a little bit in more of a general management type role. And before that, I was at YouTube for about 5 years doing product marketing. And then I had a quick initial stint in management consulting. So definitely, I'm one of those people who kind of likes to dip their toes into lots of things. I'm probably not great at any one of them, but have a little bit of experience in most, just about all things except for engineering.
Yeah, no, that's certainly a pretty incredible background. So going back to Kit, though, kit.com. So could you share maybe, just kind of in brief, what you were working on there and kind of building and, maybe the outcome and even also to some of the maybe key learnings?
Sure. I think, I would say one, definitely a lot of what happened at Kit informed how I thought about Whatnot. The genesis of Kit, I actually wasn't the one who got it started. My friend kind of brought me on as like a late ad as a co-founder. And the thesis behind Kit was the best way to discover products is through people you know and you trust. And we were trying to build a platform really around product recommendations for individuals. Ended up working on it for a few years. And, we got pretty high user numbers, but we never really figured out all the pieces, business model, and kind of broke through. And so towards the tail end of it, we ended up selling it to Patreon to spin up their merch business. And so the Patreon merch business was spun out of Kit. In terms of what kind of my key lessons, what I would say, so when we started Whatnot, me and my co-founder Logan, so Logan's my technical co-founder and CTO, we kind of had two things we agreed upon in starting Whatnot, and I would say those are informed from previous experiences, but also directly informed from my experience at Kit. So number one was we were going to start a marketplace because we had a lot of background and expertise there. And also, if you start a marketplace, broadly speaking, you don't have to solve the business model component because most marketplaces just take a cut of transactions that are happening across the platform. And that's one of the few things that you have to solve for in the early days of the startup. And that was very appealing to me coming off the Kit experience. It's very hard, as anyone in here knows who's starting a business in a marketplace in particular, it's very, very hard to get marketplaces going, and even any startup for that matter. And so the fewer problems you have to solve, the much easier it is to solve some of those. And then the other kind of tenet that we started with was a set of values under which we're going to run the company. And we basically just had 3 values, and they're pretty core to how we run the business today as well. One was we were going to be exceptionally user-driven and not vision-driven. So I think one of the biggest mistakes that you can make in the early days of a startup is you can come with this grand idea, bring it to market, and then consumers don't love it. And when that happens, it's not that consumers are wrong. It's that your vision for what the world should look like is wrong. Consumers know what they want and know what they love. And so we were never going to be beholden to the initial idea that we had. We were always going to learn from our customers and iterate the product in such a way. So that was number one. And that was also based on some historicals. Like I think this is particularly true in consumer. I'll preface with saying that I've never worked on anything B2B. My outside in perspective is that B2B can be a bit more linear and a bit clearer, because if you have a real clear view for how you're going to save a business money or time, it's much easier to start and work on that. But in consumer, almost every great consumer company, the starting place and the ending place are very, very different. I worked at YouTube for a while. YouTube started as video dating. Facebook started as like, look at photos of your friends at Harvard. And so you see like the iterations of those. Twitch was filming Justin Khan live 24 hours a day, turned into Justin TV, turned into Twitch. So that was number one. Number two was we were going to move exceptionally fast. Most software, the risk is low, and what you can accomplish can be done in a very short period of time. We built the first set of applications for Whatnot in 2 weeks. We built our live shopping functionality in 6 weeks. And by trying to, and like, I think the key thing there is certainly for software businesses, and I'll restrict this to like software, because I think there's some exceptions with hardware and things that just have more upfront costs. You don't get that much incremental impact by delivering perfection. You want good, not great, and you want to deliver that good very, very fast, so you can do as many iterations per period of time as possible. And then the second thing is we were going to take big swings and do the most impactful things. If you're trying to start a venture scale business, what you're saying is that you can create $1 billion business that either creates a new market or upsets an incumbent in existing markets in a major way. And you do not do that through incremental improvements. You do that through fundamentally different products and different experiences. It has to be, I think the popular phrase, it needs to be 10x better. It probably doesn't need to be 10x better, but it needs to be like materially better, such that you're going to get a huge number of people switching. And I think the failure case that you can find yourself in is you think that if you do 20 incremental things, those will add up to a much bigger thing, and they typically don't. And so you need like one or two big value props you're going to hang the whole thing on, and you want to figure those out. So that was, those were the key kind of values that we built Whatnot from, and they were directly related to learnings from Kit. And we hold those two today, and I would say our success is largely built upon those 3 principles.
That's pretty great. There's so much we're going to jump into with this, and you got a lot of head nods too as you're going through it. So that's a great transition into Whatnot, which we're going to chat about. So what were like the first steps that you took to actually start it as a marketplace?
So another one of our principles is that we prefer to do than plan or strategize. So the initial, and again, I said we're customer driven and not vision driven. And so we took this to a huge extreme. We didn't even know what we were going to do. We just said we're going to start building stuff. And so we initially started out with a really terrible idea, which was we were going to build like a full service Craigslist. And then my co-founder started building the product because we're like, why wait? Like, let's just do something. We'll learn much faster. You can strategize all you want, but until you get close to customers, you really don't know what's going to happen in any material way. And then I started like validate the business model, talking to like delivery companies, and doing some math. And I was like, we can't make money here. I was like, all right, we got to find a whole other business. And then I kept coming back to eBay and how eBay hadn't changed in a long time. And I was kind of looking to see if there was an opportunity there. And initially my bias was there wasn't. But as we started to like dive deeper in the market, when I was young, I used to buy and sell Pokemon cards when I was like 7 or 8. I used to sell on like eBay, Yahoo auctions, and it was like pretty big in resale market. I used to buy and resell sneakers as well. And as I started to like dive deep, what I could see was a lot of people like me getting back into collecting. And so it was like, all right, just I'm 33, so I've been working in tech for a while. I have some disposable income. There's a lot of people, more people like me now in the US, they had disposable income. Guess what they were doing? They were buying things that were nostalgic from childhood, Pokemon cards, sports cards, Funko Pops, comic books, and all of those were like rising in value. And through seeing that, I was just like, oh, I have a hypothesis that there's an opportunity to potentially upset a big chunk of eBay's business by focusing in on this new wave of collectors entering the market. I think they're like me. They grow up on a mobile phone. If we can build a much better experience, they're likely to switch away, and thus like Whatnot and it's like largely in its current incarnation was born. And again, being not supervision driven, we just kind of had vectors on which we thought we could build a much more valuable product for our consumers and our buyers and sellers. One was safety, like eBay isn't as well trusted as it used to be. There's a lot of poor moderation, et cetera, on the platform. And then we thought it wasn't fun. And a lot of the categories that we were interested in bringing on board, like sports cards, Pokemon cards, Funko Pops, comic books, etc. A lot of why you buy those things is for the community around it. It's for the experience. It's to have fun. And all of you look at most marketplaces these days, very search driven, very transactional, very, very boring. And so, then we were like, okay, we're going to start this. We didn't quite have the Whatnot name at that point, but let's just call it Whatnot. And then we're like, okay, where do we start? And we just started selling Funko Pops, which are little vinyl dolls. We started in a very, very, very narrow segment of the market. And we focused initially on the early days on the safety value prop. So I'll pause there for a second because that was a lot. And I'm happy to dive deeper and into how we got to where we are today too. But that was kind of the origins of Whatnot and the starting place.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, thanks for sharing with us on that. So, I mean, there's so many directions we could go. I just want to say I'm personally into collectibles also. So I'll have to steer clear of going on that route and talk about it as a marketplace here with everyone on today. I thought before we really dive into things though, and some of the different kind of nuances of it as a marketplace, I guess it'd be helpful if you can kind of give us a high level overview of it and at the sense of scale you're at today.
Yeah. So high level with Whatnot, we now call ourselves like a live stream shopping platform and online marketplace. The thing that differentiates Whatnot relative to most traditional marketplaces is our live and social features. The average person comes on Whatnot for about 2 hours a day, engaging with the community, watching live video, etc. Headcount wise, we're about 170 full-time employees. That this time, January of 2021, we were 10. So we've added about 160 people in the past 15 months. We'll get to about 300 people by end of this year. We've raised $225 million. We're the fastest growing marketplace ever in the United States. And we've had the title from Andreessen for the past 2 years in a row. Our scale is pretty significant. We don't really release exact numbers on that, but it's not. What I can say is we're as large as a number of publicly traded marketplaces.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. Yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. So I find it super interesting that starting in such what might be perceived as kind of like such a niche kind of category, right? In the kind of collectibles space. How did you think through kind of what the TAM was, and then kind of expansion? When it comes to categories.
Um, so there's how we thought through it, and then there's how investors thought through it, is what I would say. So in the early days, like almost all of the money we raised for Whatnot was last year. And when we first started out, we did not have an easy time fundraising. We went through Y Combinator, and then right before COVID hit. And at the end of Y Combinator, we were only able to raise $300,000. And to just give you some sense, we are by a good margin the most valuable company from our Y Combinator class today. And there's investors will look at that and they'll go, "Oh, you're just selling Funko Pops. I don't know if this can be a really large market." And that's what they said to us. And as a function of that, they didn't invest largely. We had enough, but I think particularly if you're a software business, and like you're running almost 100% on software, you don't need a lot of money. With a team of 4.5 people, we got to $1 million a month in sales. And so you don't need a tremendous number of people to go and achieve pretty material results with software. Now, then there's what we believed about the business. We believed we had a clear path for market expansion. We can go to Funkos, we can go to comic books, and if we can figure out how to launch Funkos and grow that, we can apply a similar, like a lot of these categories are very similar. You can apply a similar playbook and continue to scale outwards. The thing with investors is even venture investors is they're like relatively risk averse. And so they'll want to see like proof. They're not going to I would say there's probably like 2 buckets you can fall in. Broadly speaking, it comes from the same thing, which is like they want to have with high confidence that you have a clear expansion path of TAM. And then the problem with us was there hasn't been a competitor or player in recent memory that's achieved scale that's had a similar playbook to us. And so that's why we needed to basically prove to VCs by actually doing it to unlock the capital. What's the more typical marketplace models that I've seen recently in terms of like market expansion, like the Uber, DoorDashes of the world, where it's like you take a city or 2 cities, and then if the economics, et cetera, look really good there, the VCs can extrapolate outwards and run their models and be confident in like the returns of the business. For us, there wasn't like good comps to do that. Like the last person who's done that at meaningful scale was eBay, which was, eBay IPO'd in like 97 or 98 or something like that. And so, yeah, we just didn't raise that much money. And then what happened was we went from Funko Pops and we went into Pokemon cards. And those, within a few months became bigger than the Funko Pop business. And then we went into sports cards. And then every major Series A, or every major venture capital firm that you've heard of came knocking at that point.
Yeah. So I'm curious to learn a little bit more about expanding out of that into your kind of second category, right? Was that like at a point where you felt like you had like initial kind of product market fit and you were gonna expand into the second, or could you share a little bit more about your approach with that?
Yeah, so I'm a big believer in focus, and it's very like particularly if in the early days of a startup, you should have a really small number of people working on it if you're like software focused. Like I can I won't say any, but like 80 to 90% of software businesses, I'm pretty sure I can get off the ground with sub 6 people. And in fact, you probably want sub 6 people, because the more people who are trying to figure out product market fit that you have to manage and figure out how to build the team around and all this stuff, it's going to detract from you actually finding product market Obviously, there are exceptions. That was for our business, very software oriented. That was not the exception. And so we focused 100% on Funko Pops until we had high confidence that we had product market fit. And I also think people talk about product market fit like it's a thing and can be defined. It's not a thing that can be defined. It's like you just get to this point where you have level of confidence that the thing that you are building can scale to a really big business and like people love it. And then you go and approach the next thing. And so the signals we were looking at was like what people were saying, what our buyer retention was, what our seller retention was, what our engagement was. And they were basically just off the charts. And so as a function of that, we had very high confidence about going into a second category and starting to spread our attention a little bit thinner.
Yeah, that's great. So, how many categories are you in today? Because I know I was on the app earlier and I saw quite a bit there with watches and whatnot too. So
I couldn't tell you off the top of my head, which tells you that we're in a lot, at least 50 probably that we have sales in some material way. Definitely the business is still very collectibles focused. We kind of focus in on collectors and enthusiasts. That's the user segment that we care about. I suspect by end of year we'll be in 200 plus.
Wow. So going back to like to the early days, as far as like kind of reaching some of the kind of collectors, right? Like what are some of the ways that you did that and kind of solve like the cold start problem and then maybe continue to do so in each kind of category through expansion?
Yeah. So right now the cold start problem is less of a problem for us because we have a pretty large buyer and seller base. But in the early days, you have to like do everything and anything. And it's like quite painful and quite hacky. We initially bootstrapped almost all of the supply on whatnot. We built like a pricing algorithm for a Funko Pop. And this is another reason to start very, very narrowly, is the narrower you start, the easier it is to meaningfully solve some of these problems, like the cold start problem. Like had we gone multi-category in the early days, which again, 9 times out of 10, I'm sure there's an exception. You're unlikely to be the exception. But 9 times out of 10, I was just focus is so hard. So like I was able to build a pricing algorithm for Funkos. And what we would do is a lot of the inventory and whatnot, if someone bought it, we would then go buy it on eBay, and then the value add was like we'd authenticate it. So I became like the world's #1 Funko Pop authenticator, and I still am today. I consider that my proudest whatnot achievement. So you could come to whatnot in the early days and you had the largest inventory of authenticated Funko Pops in the world. And part of the reason, again, I'd advocate for like narrowness is if we went to 2 categories, we couldn't have achieved that. And so then we did that. And then we were worried, and we built up a pretty significant buyer base through that. And that was all sorts of hacky, messy problems too. It's like sounds neater. It's like you screw up your pricing algorithm, people go and find all the deals and mispricing. And so we had to change it all the time. Hard to get inventory. Sometimes stuff breaks. Hugely manual process. I had a team in Brazil who was like buying Funko Pops for me online all the time. They'd get sent to me. I'd be packing them, be doing at night. From like 8 to 12, I'd be like packing Funko Pops, and like during the day, I'd be building the business, etc. Then we had like throttled supply quite a bit because we wanted to make sure people could sell what they put on whatnot, and we wanted to open that up, but we were too scared we weren't going to get enough sell through. And so managed to convince someone at eBay to give us like all this API access and huge thresholds. And so we built a cross-listing. We basically just built cross-listing software through eBay's API so that anytime a seller came to whatnot, uh, all of their listings would get displayed on Whatnot and on eBay. So we basically guaranteed as a seller that your sell through would be higher than eBay. And so by like heavily moderating our platform and then having higher sell through than eBay, we built the best place to sell, buy, and sell Funko Pops. And so we built a pretty large audience and pretty large seller base. And then we layered over the top the live and the social elements, and then the business took off. And I say all that in like it sounds nice because I can summarize it in a few sentences. Let me tell you, it was really messy. It was really time consuming, and it was like quite painful.
No, I love these stories, right? The things we do as marketplace founders. So might have to go back and revise the intro to say you're the world's largest authenticator, right? So awesome. So cool. So we're going to actually jump into questions here. Otherwise, I feel like you and I could just chat about things for a while and then maybe steer into collectibles. But, before we do though, so you have some pretty incredible experience, of course, building and scaling up Whatnot to where it's at today. So, do you have any, tips or advice for, early stage marketplace founders that might be helpful?
I'd say like the values under which Whatnot was built are pretty sound principles for any consumer software company. I'd be hard pressed to imagine not operating a company like that. And then, any marketplace, you're going to have to be very, very creative in the early days and do all sorts of hacky stuff. And so I'd be ready to roll up your sleeves. Basically, if it were me and I were doing this again, I would operate under principles of customer first, move exceptionally fast, swing big, and then you better have a clear plan for your cold start problem.
Yeah, that's great. Cool. Hey, Levi or Ryan, did either of you want to come on here first?
Go over Ryan.
I was going to ask more of the, cold start problem, but you kind of took my question, asking about the eBay API was kind of crazy. We tried.
I'm surprised they let us do that.
Yeah, I'm very surprised they let you guys do that. Did you ever get any kickback from them on that, or?
So honestly, my old boss from Facebook used to work at eBay, and he connected me to one of his buddies who was pretty senior. And then I talked with him. He's like, "Oh, I'll send you to compliance," and like compliance kicked up our account and gave us like multi-million-dollar limits. And so we weren't sure if we were going to get shut down at some point, but we just kept doing it. And we kept there's all sorts of problems with doing that for what it's worth, because like you have your seller base, which is hard to manage, and then you have your outward presence, which has your reviews, et cetera, on it. So it's a pain in the ass. But yeah, we basically bootstrap both sides. We bootstrap supply, we bootstrap demand, and then we threw on everything we could to get it rolling. And then if you're like really, really focused, all of those things can add up in a more material way.
Yeah, we actually built an eBay scraper as well, but it got a bit messy. And then we kind of reached supply demand matching up, and we got rid of it just because it was too much of a headache. But
yeah, we did that at first too. So at first, so my co-founder came from Go, which is a big sneaker marketplace. And then Go, I believe, got started by scraping a lot of the eBay listings, but with sneakers, the SKU maps perfectly to the product. Whereas in Funko Pops, each SKU can have like 4 or 5 different products. And so we went trying to do SKU-based scraping at first, and then couldn't get that to work at all. And so we had to throw it away. And then honestly, I just was like, in R or something like that, I just built the pricing algorithm and added in some buffer so we wouldn't lose tons of money. And then we just like refined that through a lot of trial and error. Like at first, one of the things I wasn't keeping track of was like sell-through of the items. Like I'd have like 40,000 different types of Funkos, but the pricing algorithm was really bad when you had like only 5 or 6 of them selling each month, and you can get huge numbers of mispricings. And people would spend hours in the site finding these things. And like one night someone hosed us for like $2,000 just like finding all of the mispricings. And so then like through that, it was like, I looked at where it was good, where it was bad. And it was like, we needed at least 10 to 12 sales of that product in a month for there to be like good pricing on it. And so we just cut everything else off.
Yeah.
But again, it's like all this sounds nice. It's really messy. It's a really iterative process.
What's your main like user acquisition channel at the moment?
Sharing and paid. But paid, we only started developing paid 3 months ago. Like we were basically almost all word of mouth, and which we we invested in to like lever up, like sharing tools, getting sellers to market their stuff. We do interesting like giveaways that would require people to share. And so that's what it is today. Also, I'm going to answer I'll give you like in the early days what we did too, because it changes over time. Yeah. Because like paid is really big for us now, but paid, we wouldn't have been able to make the economics of paid work until we got to scale. The economics are really good now because we're like multi-category. We have a brand, we have trust. In the early days, like paid is almost like, maybe it will work for some, but like if you don't have any brand, people don't know you, like it's probably going to be tough. In the early days, we did influencer and giveaways to get things working. And the reason we did it is like all of the customers for Whatnot are in communities across the internet talking about all of these things. And so it was like a way for us to be topical in various communities.
Awesome. Appreciate all the advice.
Yeah, that's great. So I like the point about the community. So that's something we're actually talking about in our community all the time. How you can identify and kind of reach out to some of these very, very kind of niche collector kind of communities for the marketplaces we're building. So cool. Hey, Levi, do you want to jump on?
That's good. Hey, Grant. Thanks for this. Big fan, especially from like the kit days. One of the things, and I know you highlighted a little bit, was about around fundraising and around sort of being able to attract sort of institutional and follow-on capital, right? And so I think you talked a little bit about that, which was it wasn't until you guys really were able to sort of nail and then scale to an adjacent market. I'd love if you could go a little bit on just how you guys thought about, pulling together that initial capital, and what are different things that you've seen given, now that, you're a multi-time founder. Thanks, man.
I mean, most of the initial capital was like, we went through YC, we got some, and then it was like people in my network who felt bad for me and wrote $50,000 checks. If I'm being honest, those $50,000 checks are now like worth a lot of money. So I'm happy. And some of those are like, good friends. So I'm happy they did well. Honestly, I think fundraising was very difficult for us in the early days because the product wasn't super well formed. The market was super tight. I think our biggest check came from Wonder Ventures in LA, and they're just like, they do pre-seed LA based stuff. They were just someone who was comfortable investing, way early on, and like, people who they thought were high caliber. And so, I would probably, like, depending on if I were redoing it, I would just try and find more of those sorts of people in the early days. I also would try not to raise that much money, like really I struggle to imagine most software-based businesses needing more than 6 people to prove initial product market fit. And I think if you go above that, and I have friends now who, hit me up, and, one of my friends who raised a pretty large seed round, and they started hiring lots of people, and they have like 15 or 20 people now that don't have product market fit. But the problem that happens as soon as you get above 8, 9, 10 people is most of your time then goes to managing the people versus figuring out the product. And like, you're not going to be able to hire someone to figure something out that you and your co-founder can't. If you and your co-founder can't figure out product market fit and how to scale, you're not going to be successful. 99,999 out of whatever many zeros that is. It's like the 1 in 10,000. Yeah. So like, so as a function of that, I just like, you don't need that many people, then back yourself into how much capital you need. Like the answer is like not that much, 500, 600, 700,000. We actually moved the business to Phoenix as well. We moved out of LA. We didn't pay ourselves anything. We just kind of got like a house. That was our office. We lived in that. I didn't want to burn through cash. But that's how we did it. And then there's like, once you figure shit out, then the capital comes to you.
Yeah. I think what's cool to see there, right, is that from the offset, if someone were to look at you guys, you'd be like, all right, here's a multi-time founder. And given how much you guys have raised now, the fundraising story would have been different. Like just on just if you like quickly look at sort of like, all right, they went to YC, like, 2 years later, they're at this. But to hear that story, I think is I think it says something. And so, yeah, thanks again for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
No problem.
That's a great question, Levi. Hey, Davey, do you want to jump on? I saw you raise your hand there.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thank you, Grant, for your amazing story. This is great. So I'm running a marketplace that is actually connected to big franchise like Dragon Ball Z, Pokemon, where I do custom illustrations. So I'm definitely identify myself too in what you just said and how investors approach you. I had two questions. The first one was, how big did you go with just Funko Pop? Like, how big have you been able to grow your marketplace with just this category before you even switch to another one? And can you take us a bit through I don't want to go deep into your numbers if you don't want to share them, but like, was it like a constant growth? Have you noticed some change because maybe people would be willing to buy this for Christmas and not really the rest of the year? Can you tell us a bit more about this journey?
Yeah. So before we launched into another category, we had $700,000 a month in sales in Funko Pops. Happy to share that stat. I can tell you it's like many orders of magnitude larger today. But I won't give that exact number out. The path to getting there was bumpy. Well, it was mostly linear. It was like pretty good growth. Like we pretty consistently grew for 30-40% a month, and then we hit a few things in the product and we started to elevate to like 100% a month on just Funkos. And so I think there's a second part to that I think I'm blanking out on the question. Was there, or did I hit the things?
So it was just to understand like how you've been able to grow this, like how big you've been able to grow this category before you even jump to another one, and like if you struggle basically with your sales, like focusing only on one specific category, and how the seasoning was impacting all of that.
Yeah, so our team's also launching the NFTs right now. I'll just give you an analog for how I think about this. Because I think, what happened with us with Funkos is it now in retrospect looks like it was a pretty good decision. And there were decisions that we could have made, I think, where we went too small or too big, but I think we hit like a nice sweet spot. Broadly, and then we have a team that's launching NFTs. There's NFTs on Whatnot today, and the NFT market's really, really big. And I am always for any 0 to 1 initiative, as you can probably tell, I like really small pieces of the market. And so our NFT team is focused on a very small piece of the market and delivering a really great user experience in a small piece of the market. I'm not confident, and I've told this to our guy who's running NFTs, I'm not confident that we've picked exactly the right piece of the market. But if you don't focus in on like one component, you'll never build a good enough experience. And then like you'll also never know what the reason is you failed. Was it picking the market or something else? And so kind of the guardrail that I have for that team is, and it's a little bit easier for them because they can bootstrap our supply and demand base, is like the segment of the NFT market they're going after is basically Funko NFTs effectively. It's a pretty small market, candidly. It's like I don't know, maybe a couple $1 million a month in sales, something like that. And I was like, I don't care. Like, and some of the teams giving them flack. Well, what about the TAM? I was like, I don't really care about that. What I want to see is great and consistent week over week growth. So we have them pegged pretty aggressively. I tell the team their target's 10% week over week growth. And I don't care about you entering another market until you, after a consistent period of time, don't see 10% week over week growth. And so if they go for like 2 months or 3 months and they don't do that, then I'll like zoom in, like, let's understand why. Is there any hypotheses that we have remaining in terms of growth levers, in terms of value that we could add in the product? If we haven't knocked those down, maybe we knock those down. And once we do that, and we still see that low amount of growth, then I'd be like, we might have picked the wrong market. Let's move on to the next market. Let's apply the same framework and go. Because I think what you're really trying to do is, like, you're basically doing two things. You're trying to assess whether you've built a product that is hugely valuable. And typically speaking, if it's hugely valuable, people will come back regularly, they'll talk about it, and it will grow. And then once you have that, then you need to figure out, okay, do I have a path where I can get into adjacent markets? And, you know, for the NFT team today, it kind of looks similar to what it looked like for us. It's like, I can articulate a path. We haven't proven that path, but I have, like, you know, call it like 90% confidence in that path. So I prefer them to focus on the valuable experience, see if we can get that, and then move on to the next one. So in some, focus a little bit on growth rates and value, try to have hypotheses that I'm trying to prove or disprove, and then like time box the period of time to prove or disprove those, because it's totally possible you picked the wrong initial segment. But you'll only know once you knock down your big hypotheses for how you're going to deliver value.
Thank you very much. Super helpful. And the second question was, because you struggled to find investor, but you finally did, is there a chance that you can connect me with with them? So I'm going to save a lot of time.
You know, like, if you hit me up afterwards, I'm happy to connect you to people who could be helpful. You know, investors by and large are going to invest the way they invest. And so, you know, I think if you're very early on, what you're trying, and there's like, you're in a market that's not hot, then what you're going to invest on is based on what the team can do. And so I think you need to prove you as like a team of people can go and deliver. And then if you do that, you can probably unlock enough capital to get it done. And then the later stages of the business, it's just a math equation at that point. They're like, investors are trying to get ROI. And so the thing that you have to frame for them is like, are you going to get ROI? And, you know, I could connect the dots, but if you don't have one, proof that you can build, like your team's good and can build and deliver, you won't get to an early capital. And then later capital is entirely predicated on whether your business is good. I have not run a formal fundraise. I raised $225 million with no deck or anything. I didn't even talk to any investors. They all came to me.
That's amazing. Thank you very much.
Yep.
It's pretty amazing. Hey, Grant, so, you know, on the note of growth, you know, at what stage did you bring on a growth lead and start to build out a growth team?
We brought on Jeff Chang, who runs growth for us in December 2021. So he's been here 4 or 5 months. You know, what I like broadly, how I think about startups is you have to figure out 3 things. You have to figure out what's a valuable product you're going to build. You have to figure out how you're going to grow it, and you have to figure out how you're going to make money from it. And until you can answer how you're going to do each one of those, don't outsource them. Because if you can't figure it out, you're not going to be able to hire someone who's going to figure it out for you. And I can guarantee you that, having now hired 100, I mean, we'll be about 200 people soon. I've seen a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds with, you know, stellar resumes, stellar work experience, etc. Let me tell you, if you can't figure it out, no one else can.
No, that's great. I think the helpful insights shared per minute here on this group chat is going to be up there. There's so much awesome insights that you're sharing with us here. Cool. So let's see, Maxine, did you want to jump on?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. When are you writing a book? These are great. You have like endless amounts of stories. I think anyone that employs 200 people should write a book. But anyways, this is great.
Oh, I have
you.
some stories over the last year.
I know. I wish more startups would just write books about stories. I'm just like, tell me all the stories.
It gets
That's
wild.
my first question. Agree, it's wild. It's like an adventure that's climbing. It's Everest is nothing compared to a startup. I honestly am like, the stories that you get are much more diverse. But anyways, excellent answers. Excellent. I love how you share from the hypothesis. Like it's a lot of hypothesis thinking and narrowing down, and like, if you can't figure it out, someone else is not going to figure it out. That's very good advice for a lot of the industry. My question is, as a CEO that went through this insane growth expansion personally, what is your like weaknesses as a CEO? What are your strengths as a CEO? And like general thoughts and feelings about how you feel about the different stages when you're creating versus it being a math equation.
Weaknesses, strengths, math equation. Weaknesses. I think one, I'm not a great manager, and now I have with contractors, 200 plus people who directly, roll up. And I have an executive team full of like pretty seasoned executives at this point who have all managed 150 plus person orgs. I'm not the one who's gonna up level them. It's like you can come in and you can do the job or you can't, to be honest. And like I'm pretty good at some things, but like that's not one of them. Then I tend to be, I tend to want to see the best in people and like help people. And like when you're going through this hyper growth, sometimes when you bring in leaders and they can't do a good job, it really messes with the whole organization and everyone else below them. And so I've probably been a little too trigger shy when we've brought in leadership who hasn't like done a great job. I don't like there's generally like the Silicon Valley view of like, fire fast. Like when I talk with most CEOs of big companies, that's what they say. I don't think that's exactly the right philosophy, if I'm being honest. Like I think it creates a lot of fear and distrust. But the truth is, like as you scale, you're gonna, and this again gets back to the same point. If you can't figure it out, no one else can figure it out. Like you're gonna see people who are gonna come into roles and not gonna succeed. And like it's healthier for everyone to move on. And so that's been like a relative weakness. You get hardened to that over time a little bit. Strengths. I'm pretty good at like setting up systems, strategies, and executing. Like I would say for a company that's grown as fast as we are, we have a very well-aligned team with very, very clear goals that executes exceptionally well. We're probably one of the fastest moving companies around. Like we ship more than anyone else does. I've been very, very focused on strategy and execution. That's kind of my sweet spot. Like when things are too slow, I still run into the org and I tear things up and I like make stuff happen. The math equation, I think I think this is also a failure mode, if I'm being honest. Like, and this is where I think YC is good. I like YC's slogan, which is like build something people love, build something people want. And I think although like your business grows and it becomes more of a math equation, you never want it to become a full math equation, because at the end of the day, your business is like whether your consumers love what you've built, and that is not a math equation. And so that is the root of all of the successes. And the way I kind of manage that is, and then there's also like one of the beautiful things about a marketplace is generally speaking, it's not like doesn't completely hold, but generally speaking, growth also makes the product better. So you get more supply and more demand. And so that's one of like the elegant bits about a marketplace that I really, really, really appreciate. And so it makes some of the hard trade-offs a little bit easier because scale is just an advantageous thing for both your buyers and sellers. But in all honesty, we basically have, so there, like the way I kind of think about our org is we have a bunch of like support functions, and then we have like 3 drivers of the business. So the first driver of the business is like our product team, which is, it's like 50 engineers, a couple PMs, and a few designers. And like most of what they do is just figure out how to solve buyer and seller problems. And they like, there's no metrics, like they track their stuff once it ships, but like the decisions and the road mapping that we create has like almost nothing to do with metrics. It's about like, do we think people want this? Is there going to be a lot of value? And then we have our growth team and we have our go-to-market team. And those are basically like the numbers machines. And so they're basically targeted on like new buyers, new sellers. And again, like the good thing about a marketplace is that then it really makes the consumer experience better. But that's kind of how I manage it. Is I have some teams that are like much more math equation-y, and then some teams that just think about user problems. And that allows us to achieve this nice balance of keeping the business growing while also just making the product better over time.
Thank you.
Hey, Matt, do you want to jump on?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Grant. Really appreciate your time, and love the story about making people feel bad for you, because I'm doing that right now at $10,000 or $20,000 checks. So I think I'm running out on that, but it's, that's fantastic. The timing was the question that I had for you. You launched in December 2019, right? So how do you feel timing played a part in the success of the business?
If there wasn't another one of us, we could start the same business today and probably still do quite well. With us in the market, I mean, we're, I think it would be, I don't know that we could compete really well against a company running like ours at the moment. I mean, so investors will always be like, why now? Like they want to answer that question, like, why hasn't this business been started previously? And then like, candidly, if you're fundraising, you should have a really good answer to that. Because like investors think in a very specific way. I don't think it mattered that much. There's definitely some component of it. There's definitely, for our type of business, there's certainly like a window. I can tell you that all of the startups who went into like live and social shopping, we were the last entrant in terms of like people who have raised material amount of money today, and we're by far the biggest. I think it came down mostly to execution. So I think these answers, like people always look for like one reason why something happens, and it tends to be like this layering of things. I think there was a window for us to attack our problem. I think if you see market openings and like tailwinds, those are advantageous, but there are examples and counter examples of businesses who succeed or don't succeed. And then for our type of business, there's probably a couple year window from what I've seen. Like we could have launched it 2 years earlier, and I'm pretty sure we're just as successful. If I were restarting a business and trying to approach a market, I would probably be looking for some tailwinds, because I think like the tailwinds are materially advantageous. I don't know that I could predict the right tailwinds coming into the market, so I may have to like figure that out as I went along.
Awesome. That's a great question. So we're almost out of time here, but wow, this is a really incredible chat, and definitely a fun one too. So thanks, for taking the time to join us. I know you're definitely busy running the fastest growing marketplace. Last question that I had for you though, right before we wrap things up though, if you were to go back to right before you started Whatnot, what would you tell yourself about marketplaces?
I couldn't have predicted the series of events, occurring more positively than they did. I would say it took us about 10 months to hit critical velocity, and those 10 months were quite painful. I would just continue to like, honestly, like our hypotheses up front seemed to be correct. And I would just make sure I had greater resolve for those. And the greater my resolve for those things, the faster we actually would have gotten to where we are. And anytime we wavered on that resolve for kind of some of those principles, the longer it took and the harder the path was. Like, I think we did too many incremental things up front. We almost went multi-category early and then fell away from it. And so wasted a bunch of time on that. I'd say like, look for, I think our product was a little bit more me too early on. It took us a while to find our legs and really develop the breakaway product. I probably would have swung bigger, focused more, and those would probably be my things that I would redo.
Yeah, no, that's great. So that's a great way to wrap things up. So, thanks once again. This is a really awesome chat. I really enjoyed it, and huge hats off to you and what you built with the team there. So we're all definitely big fans of Whatnot. So and then just the last kind of thing, where can we keep up to you? Time for kind of a quick plug.
I'm not really big on social media, but I do have a Twitter at Grant LaFontaine. I don't really tweet anything. That's another one of my principles is like, you're starting a business, just be like, don't let anything distract you from building a great business. So, I'm not super active. So, follow Whatnot. You'll see what's going on in Whatnot's Twitter. You can give us an extra follow and boost the company's socials.
Awesome. I'll definitely include the links in the description of this. So, well, cool. Well, thank you once again. Really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for the great questions today. So
cool. Thanks everyone. I appreciate you coming on, and good luck everyone with your businesses. It's a fun and challenging journey, but take care.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks, Grant.